podcast where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas. And folks, we are really going crazy with this whole crowdfunding, real estate opportunity zones. Our last podcast was really great. Really enjoyed that. And we're going to keep the momentum going by introducing Vicki Hutchmala from the QOZ Marketplace. Vicki, how are you today?
I'm outstanding today, Ron. Another beautifully hot day in Vegas. What more could we want? Although we do have an excellent guest with a different point of view with us this morning.
Good. Well, it's always nice to hear different point of views, and you know, whenever something comes up in the world and industry evolves, there's always people that will like come up with some kind of an organization to help everybody out. And with that, let's introduce Aaron Grau. He's the executive director of the Opportunity Zone Association. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys.
Yes, opportunity is the key word these days, right? Everyone's talking about it. You know, you do a search right now on opportunity, and you know, you get all kinds of crazy things too. But I also noticed that you're also seeing opportunity zones in those search results. So even Google's like kind of getting on this thing too. So it's a really interesting industry. And you know, what is your background, Aaron? How did you get into this whole thing?
My background is actually in association management and development in general. I met a guy named Kyle Walker, who is OZAA's founding member. He and I were working on a different project in Washington, D.C., focused on economic development. And he and I got to talking about the influx of opportunity and opportunity zones into everybody's vocabulary, and his belief that it would be will become a phenomenal economic development tool. And he said, what do you think about helping to develop an association around opportunity zones? And as I said, I have some experience in developing associations, so I agreed to do it and have been working with Kyle and the rest of our board members. Not that long. I mean, momentum didn't take long to pick up, but we've been working at it since about the third quarter 2018. Yeah, here we are today with the privilege of being on a podcast. I mean, who knew?
That's right. Yeah, things move fast in the opportunity zone world here. So you guys are where are you based out of?
Washington, D.C. We have offices that are not too far from the White House, but to tell you the truth, you know, being based in Washington, D.C. is a bit of a red herring. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the work that we do is not focused in Washington, D.C. It's really at the city, the municipal, the community, even the neighborhood level across the country. But we do have a policy initiative as well, and we are paying attention to Capitol Hill and the Department of the Treasury, et cetera, with regards to regulation. So it made sense for us to sort of plant a stake in D.C., but suffice to say that I'm, quote, rarely in the office, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about where we are, we're in Las Vegas, of course, and all the trade shows from all over the world come over here, and it's right in our backyard, so we get to go to a lot of trade shows. I would imagine you being in Washington, if something comes up with news-wise, you might be the first to know because you're so local to the place. So I guess maybe that's a benefit to where you are, right?
Yeah, it is definitely. News travels fast. My guess is if I get a news bite at 9:00 in the morning, you guys will have it at 9:01. It's the way information travels. You know, the reason that we're there is really to pay attention to the public policy debate and how new public policy is formed around opportunity zones, both from a legislative perspective as well as a regulatory perspective. But like I said, truth be told, that's only one element of what we do. We figured if we wanted to do that well, we needed to be in D.C., so we are. But it's really only one aspect of what the association focuses on. The majority of what we focus on is developing conversations with an intent to ignite deals in opportunity zones across the country. And what we're finding in our conversations in large communities, small communities, is that even some of the very sophisticated investors and developers in the country are maybe only barely familiar with opportunity zones. And it's interesting for me to see folks who are highly intelligent and very sophisticated in the development world scratch their head and ask a guy like me, what is an opportunity zone? And I'm like, holy cow, well, sit down, let me tell you. There's a lot to know and a lot to digest. So our conversations on a local basis are really what is motivating me, and it's what is igniting the association.
That's it.
We're feeling that here.
Yeah,
we're feeling that here in Vegas, too, because a lot of people here in town, I know a lot of really heavy-hitter commercial real estate guys here who ask me, basically a podcaster, about the opportunity zone. So you're absolutely right. There really needs to be a lot of learning, a lot of education out there. And I guess a major part of what you're doing is the advocacy of it as well. So that's a tough job, for sure. And I can imagine it takes a lot of your time out.
Well, so far it's a labor of love. I tell everybody, as soon as I stop having fun doing anything, I'm going to move on to something else. But
the nature of the game, right?
That's the nature of the game. But the people that I'm meeting and the possibilities that opportunity zones present to communities is really thrilling. To think that it could very well be part of the next economic boom of the United States is really something to consider, and really something to, in my opinion, people would want to be in on the ground floor of. One of the things that I've heard many people say over and over again, and it's worth repeating, and I've tried to internalize it, is that there's really no such thing as an opportunity zone project. It's really projects that are in opportunity zones. These opportunity zones are tools that can be used by economic developers, real estate developers, business developers, and as soon as we figure out how to really leverage the investment possibilities, I really do think we're going to see an economic boom.
Well, it's the crux of the whole program is to invest in communities to lift up the folks that live there as well as the communities. That's the whole purpose of the program. But educating people to understand that's even there for an opportunity is one of the reasons why Ron and I do the podcast and have various websites to educate people so that they understand what's going on, just like you do. Let me ask you a question. What kind of legislative initiatives are you actually working on?
Well, we're not proactively doing anything right now. We're watching, what's happening on the Hill. The regulatory process is, by and large, complete. The Treasury Department has released the last tranche of regulations that I believe we'll see. I do think we're going to continue to see what's called regulatory guidance or guidance memoranda from the Department of the Treasury and possibly even some of the other agencies with and around opportunity zones. But the heavy lift, I think, for the time being on regulatory matters is done. On Capitol Hill, you have members like Senator Scott, who was one of the protagonists around opportunity zones, wanting to already introduce legislation that would, for example, put back into the rules around opportunity zones requirements for impact reporting. There's also been, conversations about the possibility of trying to expand opportunity zones. In other words, in federal legislation that would allow for the inclusion of new opportunity zones. I don't see that moving very far. But I do see the conversation around requirements for investors and developers to begin tracking, what sort of success opportunity zone investments are bringing to communities. That language was actually stripped out of the original legislation that actually became statute and then codified in the Internal Revenue Code. The language requiring people to report out on the metrics around opportunity zone investments was stripped out. So there's an effort to pass new legislation that would put it back into project development. And ultimately I think that can be a good thing, but when it comes to statutes, you always the devil's in the details, and you never know what those are going to be until the very end.
Well, and if you make the program too burdensome, people are not going to participate if they have to start reporting every little thing they do. And not only that, but the program needs to have a history so people will be able to invest, because we are finding out that a lot of investors who even know about opportunity zones are a little hesitant about investing simply because there's no history about whether they work or how they work or what's going on, and that needs to be developed a little bit too, I think.
I agree, and the one way to spur investment in opportunity zones, going all the way back to what we started talking about at the beginning, is to educate people about what they are and what their purposes are. And again, one of the reasons the Opportunity Zone Association of America began to coalesce was our realization that in order to spur that investment, in order to that will create that track record, that will then persuade more people to invest, you have to strike a balance in communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Investors who have the money to put into an opportunity zone are typically going to want to see a return on their investment. Does it always make sense to, for example, put a Whole Foods in a distressed area? No, it doesn't. But, an investor might see a return on that investment. Does that meet the spirit of the law? No. So we have to have a balance between, what investors are seeking out of this scenario and what communities need out of this scenario. And that's not always an easy, circle to square, so to speak. So it's going to take a lot of education. It's going to take a lot of creativity and strategy and investment of time and thinking, as well as money, to figure out what projects work in what communities, and then to disseminate those best practices so that communities that are like those would be able to leverage that good work. And that's a big part of what OZAA is trying to do as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of communities have to be involved in their opportunity zone projects because communities know what's best for their communities. Somebody who lives in Utah wants to invest in Las Vegas. They have to understand Las Vegas. It's not like any other place in the country, and certain projects work in certain areas, and community leaders need to be able to decide what works, make sure that the investor wants to invest in the project, and then, in addition, streamline the process to get the project going. If you have to wait 3 years before you get a permit to start a project, you'll miss out on the whole opportunity zone benefit. There's a whole symbiotic relationship that needs to exist, even if you even know about the opportunity zone program in the first place. So you keep going back to that. Education is key.
One of the things that we're doing in education is, to your point, is trying to educate communities on how to represent themselves and speak to potential investors. What information is going to be important to those investors, and how do you relay that information? That is a vernacular and a mode of communication that a lot of local small communities, distressed communities, rural communities, don't always understand, and they may be trying to put their best foot forward, but they may be speaking directly past what a potential investor may want to really know about. So it's important to educate those folks about, what it is that a family trust or a qualified opportunity fund of another sort needs to know before they invest in your community. And how do you share that information? Where do you share it? What's the most effective way to share it? That element of education and communication we feel is important. So we're conducting webinars, and we're putting together boot camps for communities to participate in, and we're bringing in investors to help run those conversations so that communities can hear it from the horse's mouth. Look, this is what we need to know about. We don't need to know about how many sidewalks you have and and your green space, although that may be important to some folks. What we need to know about as investors are X, Y, and Z. And so that dialogue is important, and the association is working hard to facilitate it.
When you talk about these communities, Aaron, are you talking about the actual representatives, people in government, or are you talking about the people who live in these communities per se?
Both. So I'll give you an example. We're putting together a project like this in Pittsburgh. And we were invited in to assess the community. And what we did first was reach out to all of the community opportunity zone stakeholders, and we brought them together for a conversation, informal conversation about what you think the assets are in your community opportunity zones, and what do you think the hurdles are to getting people to invest. And we had a very lively and informative conversation on those two questions. The OZAA then brought that information back to its Washington, D.C. headquarters, if you will, and we processed it and synthesized it. And then we went back out to a national network and we said, these are the questions and issues that we need to address for Pittsburgh. We'd like to bring you in for what we call a catalyst event in Pittsburgh, and we'd like to hear from you about these issues. So, for example, one of the issues in Pittsburgh, a recurring issue, has been the need for low-income housing and the hurdle that local community leaders, who are both elected officials as well as neighborhood leaders and economic development officials, one of the challenges they've had is trying to explain to a potential investor how they may see a return on their investment if it comes to developing low-income housing in some of Pittsburgh's opportunity zones. So we're going to bring in investors and thought leaders to address that issue almost on a parcel level for the communities in Pittsburgh that have opportunity zones, to help them understand, this is how I can go about attracting investment for low-income housing in my opportunity zones. And these are the funds that I don't need to talk to, and these are the funds that I do want to talk to, and here's how I should talk to them. It's that kind of almost, I would say, grassroots communication that I think will begin developing those best practices for communities like Pittsburgh that we can begin to disseminate and share and replicate, so that, Vicki, we get back to what you said, which was developing that track record so there is more confidence among investors on how opportunity zones work.
Exactly. It always comes back to the crux. Education is the key. You have to not only educate people to understand that the program exists, but in addition, how it works and what the hurdles are to make it successful. And that's one of the basic reasons why associations and exist. Trade associations exist simply to give you the opportunity to learn more and better ways of doing whatever it is your trade is.
Yeah. I mean, we are a nonprofit. We're developing data-related tools that will be available to our members at one level and to everybody, quite frankly, at another level in order to meet our mission. And we're hoping that those data-related tools will also be very helpful in educating investors and communities as to what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. So, Aaron, who are the members of the association? Are they developers? Are they investors? Are they municipalities, or what?
All of the above. On the one side of the spectrum, you have qualified opportunity funds, or investors, as I refer to them. And on the other side of the membership spectrum, you have the communities themselves. So, for example, the community of Phoenix, the community of Phoenix, Arizona, the community of Etna, Pennsylvania, the community of Clareton, Pennsylvania. So that's on one side, and then you've got the investors on the other side. And then in the middle, you've got a panoply of folks who are interested in participating in the industry. So, for example, attorneys, business plan developers, accountants, again, statisticians, insurance companies, everybody in the middle who help facilitate the deals that go down in opportunity zones, sort of fill in the sea between community officials on the one end and investors. And qualified funds on the other.
It's important to have experts helping you when you establish your fund and create your fund, regardless of where you're investing or what kind of project you're doing. You have to have the experts, the attorneys, the CPAs, the analytical database guys to help you set it up correctly, make sure that you're compliant with all the rules and regulations and the time frame within which you have to do and act whatever you're doing in order to be successful. That's a whole nother thing. And so that's a good thing that you have those experts being members. How many members do you have?
We've got, I think, 6 founding members and then a growing number of additional members, maybe 10 or so plus. As I said, we've been at this since Q3 last year. So it's taken some time to incorporate, develop bylaws, committee structure, dues structure, website, put the skeleton together, and then begin to actually provide benefits to communities and to members. So the snowball is starting to roll.
Excellent.
Yeah, no question. I have another question for you on this too. When you're talking about these communities, what are you doing to get the word out that you guys exist within a community, like a community, let's say in Las Vegas, or the government officials in a certain area? How would they know about you, other than listening to this podcast, of course?
Right, other than listening to this podcast, which will be heard far and wide, I am sure. So far it hasn't been an issue, although we are developing a communication strategy and an advertising and marketing strategy. But so far it really hasn't been an issue. It's been a question of social media and a question of word of mouth. Some of our founding members are fairly large corporations that have significant reach into communities across the country. So, as it stands right now, I was explaining to you a little bit about what we were doing in Pittsburgh, but as it stands right now, the city of Atlanta, the city of Hartford, the city of Glendale, the city of Phoenix, the city of Milwaukee are all asking us to develop projects and programming in those areas as well. So, by and large, it's been, we haven't done much. We haven't needed to do much. The capacity for our staff to be able to implement programming, in all of those areas at once is practically impossible until we gear up a bit more. But I imagine that as we flesh out a marketing plan, participate more in events like OZAA expos, and state and local economic development events, that the word will get out even further about OZAA. Again, you can come at this from 2 perspectives and 2 different audiences. You can come at this and you can talk to Goldman Sachs and PNC Bank and BlackRock and everybody who's got a lot of money to invest and explain to them, the benefits and the tax benefits of an OZAA investment. Or you can talk to CDFA and the National Conference of Mayors and the National Council of State Legislators and local communities and let them know we're a service as well. And again, it's always a balance. It's a real tightrope. We don't want to be seen as appealing to one side of the equation more than the other side of the equation. We're really hoping to stay balanced, and so our marketing strategy does and will reflect that.
Do you charge a membership fee to the municipalities, or do you allow them to be members without cost?
No, there is a fee. It's de minimis. I think it's maybe $500 a year. $1,000 if they want to become a founding member, and then $500 a year after that. It's really more of a token that we use to help underwrite, some initial initiatives for those communities, but small fee.
Well, that's within a budget. It's not like that could be their petty out of their petty cash fund as opposed to an agenda item.
Yeah, precisely. We're not looking to break the bank. That's not the point. Again,
no, you want more members than
right.
That's the point.
Right.
Do you foresee where the OZAA Association of America would be the founding association, and then eventually have branch associations in all the different states?
Yeah, I mean, that's one strategy that we've discussed. We're far from that, and there's a lot of competition out there, as I'm sure you know. But our game plan is to be methodical, to entertain those types of opportunities as they present themselves. We're certainly not going to walk away from an opportunity for the establishment of OZAA Nevada, for example, and provide support to that as a chapter organization. We haven't gotten there yet, but the bottom line for us from a business growth perspective of a nonprofit trade association in this industry is to be methodical. I've noticed that there is a lot of harried and frenetic energy around opportunity zones. Everybody feels like they've got to hurry up and do something in order to leverage this opportunity and to keep it alive and to take advantage of it as much as possible. And I think what people find is that they sprint up to the brink and realize there's a lot more that they need to know and want to know.
Oh, absolutely.
Money on the table. So rather than seem as though we're profiteering, which is definitely not what we're doing, we've decided to take a very methodical approach to establishing data, to establishing best practices, to establishing case scenarios of success that we can then build on. And we feel like, look, if the industry outpaces us and we're simply not viable because someone else has scooped us, so to speak, then so be it. We don't think that's going to happen, though. I think a methodical pace to describing to everybody what is successful and what is not will ultimately be, a winning hand, not only for the association but for the members and the communities that we want to help.
And a lot depends on whatever legislative initiatives you do in the future to extend the program and help its future. So as the program grows, the association will grow, and time will tell how it all works out.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Again, one of the reasons we want to, pay attention to what happens in Washington, D.C., there's a fear that we have that because this program is part of the Trump tax plan, that the program can be easily weaponized politically, and that, if it doesn't demonstrate success for investors and it doesn't demonstrate progress for impact-based, projects, that one side or the other would quickly say, this is either the rich getting richer, we should get rid of it, or it's going to be, another failed economic development tool, let's get rid of it. There really has to be a balance, and legislation has to reflect that. So there's a lot of quirks to keep underwater, but we're hoping that an association, as it grows with new and diverse members, can help do that.
Right, because you have to transcend the politics of it, because a change in who's running the country will determine whether or not the program continues, just as you said. You have to be able, this is an outstanding program that actually helps the community, regardless of your political inclination, regardless of whether you're the investor or the end user. It helps everybody, and it needs to continue into the future. That's something that your association can definitely help to realize.
I hope so. You are correct, and I hope that we can do that.
Yeah, and Aaron, I was looking at your website the other day, and you have a news section there. And one of the articles, I believe, it had something to do with government investors need to lift opportunity zones, but communities will define the success. And that's basically what we're talking about this whole podcast. As we see more and more successful communities, the program gets stronger and stronger. And that's a great point to kind of summarize this entire podcast. But why don't you tell the people out there how to get a hold of you if they're interested in becoming a member, they want to go to your website, give you a call. What's the best way to reach you?
Best way to reach me would be, I'll just give you my email address and the phone number. It's aaron.grau@OZAA.org, or you could also send a message to info@OZAA.org, or visit us on the web, www.OZAA.org. And I'm more than willing to take phone calls. It's funny, I give out my phone number frequently, and people are always like, "What, Aaron? Why are you giving out your phone?" I'm like, "It's so infrequent. Take advantage of it. Call me. It's 412-480-1809. Give me a call. I feel like I'm selling, something, on an infomercial here. But honestly, the association.
That's what we're doing, giving you that opportunity, Aaron. Take advantage.
You're very gracious. I appreciate that. But, I think to get in touch with the association, just info@ is maybe a great way to do it.
And not only that,
there's more.
There's more. And plus, we know Jimmy Flores, and we know he's going to be an excellent membership director for you, help you grow your association.
I have never met anybody quite like Jimmy. He is magnanimous. He is tireless. And I think he, maybe more than anybody else that I've bumped into, has such a profound understanding of the possibilities that opportunity zones provide for communities. He's invested himself, and I give him a lot of kudos, and I'm grateful to him for making this connection.
Yeah, it's like I told him the other day.
And not only that, but he's young. Usually you have to be a little older to understand those concepts, and he's a young guy with a lot of passion.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, no, that's rare these days. We're glad to be working with him.
I told him the other day after our podcast, I said, Jimmy, if I were ever running for president, I want you to be my campaign director because this guy gets things done.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm sure he will be your campaign director unless he's running for president also.
Exactly. That's funny. All right. Well, Vicki, you have any closing remarks or questions for Aaron?
Well, no, Aaron, I just want to say that what you're doing is exceptional. I hope this podcast helps you to get new members, and the guests that we've had on previous podcasts and connections that we make, we will connect with you to help you out.
You guys are great. We can't thank you enough for this time. I know it's valuable, and I'm very, very grateful to be part of your program. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for being on a guest. And Vicki, thank you for co-hosting the podcast today. Everybody out there, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast on mappableusa.com. That's the website. Go there, scroll down. You'll see all our syndication sources. You pick the one you like best so you'll never miss another episode. And if you want to be a guest on the show like Aaron was today, there's a guest tab there. You can click on that, fill out the form. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So once again, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks for subscribing. We love that you do this. You help us out a lot. And we'll come at you next time with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.